in the senior care industry and with hospice for 17 years. She really knows her stuff, and she has just been amazing in providing care for our residents. And I will let Holly take the stage. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lindsay, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity, and we just love working with you guys at Optimize. I think it's been just a really great teamwork that has benefited residents, families, and everybody involved. So I'm going to talk about aging in place, like Lindsay said, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It'll take me a second here, share. Okay, there we go. So everybody's familiar with the elephant in the room, right? The elephant in the room is something that nobody wants to talk about, but really needs to be discussed, and it's an obvious thing that needs addressed. And obviously that's hospice, the elephant in the room. So hospice can really help people age in place when treatments are no longer working, and really shift the focus from curative type of care or life prolonging to quality of life, and really just making the most of precious time. So, you know, maybe the doctor's saying, there's no more we can do. Or maybe treatments like physical therapies, things like that, chemo, whatever it is, maybe they're just not working anymore. You know, maybe going back and forth to the hospital all the time is exhausting, and the burden of having to do that far outweighs any benefit that the person, the patient or resident, if you will, gets from that. So there's lots of reasons why hospice could help age in place, and that just gives you kind of an overview. So I'm going to talk about how hospice can help, what qualifies somebody for hospice, and also how hospice is paid for. But before I do that, I know hospice is a really scary word, so I'm going to talk about the H word. It's like a dirty word in some circles. Those of us who know hospice know that it's not a dirty word, and it's not what it used to be. So believe it or not, actually about 10% graduate because their condition actually improves. Sometimes when we get in there and not only provide the extra layer of support, but also ease the anxiety that people have. And frankly, taking people off of medications that are no longer helping them, that may have bad side effects, can be really helpful, and getting their pain or respiratory breathing symptoms under control, whatever those symptoms are, once we get a person more comfortable and really focus on quality of life, making the most of precious time, like I said, their condition may actually improve a little bit. No, we're not going to go in, we're not miracle workers, we're not God, we're not pretending to be God, but we can really help them in so many ways. Some patients actually live for a year or even longer. Christina, our nurse, can attest that we've had patients for like 2 years sometimes, which is absolutely crazy. It's an outlier, sure, but it can happen. So really it's an extra layer of support, like I said, and it's about managing symptoms at home. Instead of that patient or that resident having to go to the hospital, we can manage them right there at Optimized Senior Living or wherever the person calls home. And so that's really what we're talking about, right? If somebody lives at Optimized and Assisted Living, or if they live at home or wherever they live, we can really come alongside the caregivers and allow that person to age in place. Aging in place is so important because we know that it's difficult for very sick and fragile people to make transitions, right? So if you had to transition somebody into another setting, like if they're at Optimized and without hospice, they might have to go to a nursing home. That's a very difficult transition for them to make. And it's also, especially in this time of isolation, it's also nursing home is a more restrictive setting. So if they can stay at Optimized or assisted living, then they have more of a chance of having more visitors. It's a more home-like environment, and there's just lots of benefits to it, right? So let's talk about some facts here. 25% of deaths occur at home. This compares to 80% of Americans actually prefer to die at home. So why do we see this big disconnect there? It's because of fear, right? People are afraid to get hospice. They're afraid to get the help that they need. What hospice does is we honor patients' wishes. So we can actually make the connection there between the patient's wishes and the care setting that's provided, the care and the care setting, right, that's provided. We honor patients' wishes by managing symptoms at home without having to send a patient to the hospital or even to a hospice inpatient unit. I think what's happened is a lot of people have come to think that hospice is a place, like an inpatient unit. We do not, at Queen City Hospice, we do not have an inpatient unit. What we do is we specialize in keeping people home, aging them in place at Optimized or wherever they call home. So we can bring the care right to the person's home and they don't have to get in an ambulance and go someplace else, which is it's really a blessing for the patients and families. Okay, how do we help age in place? To stay in an assisted living setting, hospice is usually required as the person's care needs progress. I know at the end, Lindsay can answer questions about, or Shauna, specifically what those care needs are and when they call in hospice for those care needs. But as their needs progress, wound care, needing more and more assistance with daily living, two-person assist, things like that, hospice is actually required for that person to be able to age in place and assisted living and not have to move up to the nursing home level of care. What happens in the assisted living is the staff ends up calling us. They call hospice instead of 911. We have nurses on call 24/7. So we send a nurse out to make a visit and get the patient comfortable to manage those symptoms. Sometimes like a regular nursing visit is not enough to get the patient comfortable. That's when we start continuous care if we need to do that. That means we would have a nurse bedside continuously. It could be for a few hours. It could be for a day, 2, 3 days, whatever it takes to make sure that the patient is comfortable. I think one thing that's really important is we do routine visits. Like even when the patient is pretty stable, we do routine nursing visits to stay on top of their symptoms. We can stay on top of identifying like UTIs, like different infections, treating those infections with antibiotics as needed, and stay on top of somebody's pain before it gets out of control. That's really important. It is also important for everybody to know that not all hospices are the same. So at Queen City, we are spending more time by the bedside. So our nurses will come out on a routine a couple days a week. But having said that, some of our patients, and Christina can attest to this, are being seen even daily by our nurse, depending on what's going on with them, or even multiple times a day, right? Because we really want to stay on top of symptoms and make sure that they're comfortable. The hospice philosophy. The hospice philosophy is really about making the most of precious time. If I had to put it in a nutshell, that would be the nutshell. So we provide support and care for those who I always say are in their final chapter. That chapter could be an hour, it could be a day, a week, it could be a year or two. So that chapter could vary in length, but it is their final chapter. It's their final journey here on earth as they prepare to like transition to the next world. We recognize dying as part of the normal process of living. I got news for you. None of us are going to make it out of here, right? Of course, that's not news for anybody, but people don't, our society is a death-denying society. And I just watched A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers movie. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. And there's a death scene at the end. And Mr. Rogers says, you know, death is part of life. I know he's with a family. I know it's hard to talk about, but anything that is part of life is worth mentioning And if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So let's mention hospice. Let's mention it to people who might need it, because, or even mention that somebody's declining. You don't have to mention hospice right away. Start the conversation. Hey, so-and-so, your loved one is declining. How is that for you? How are you doing with that? Start the conversation, because let's mention these things. Because if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And we really do help manage the process. It affirms life and neither hastens nor postpones death. Some people think, oh, hospice comes in, they hasten the death. That's not true at all. It's just when we get called in at the last minute, of course, the patient's gonna die, right? Which does sometimes happen. We get called in at the last minute, but we don't wanna hasten anybody's death, and we don't wanna postpone it. We let the natural process take place. We focus on quality of life for the resident and their family and caregivers. The core aspect of hospice care is we're patient and family focused, not just the patient. We're interdisciplinary team care. We provide a range of services like interdisciplinary case management. We cover pharmaceuticals as related to the hospice diagnosis and for comfort. We cover durable medical equipment and supplies. We do have some volunteers like pet therapy, and we provide grief support as well throughout the whole process, not just after somebody dies, but even there's anticipatory grief. Like when people know their loved one is dying, or maybe they're grieving because they've already lost their loved one to dementia. Whatever the grief may be, we help them with their grief from beginning to end and even after their loved one passes. So who are the hospice team members? So hospice is really like a wraparound care, right? It's holistic wraparound care to support physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. That's it in a nutshell. The patient can keep their PCP, who collaborates with our physician. We have nurses, we have home health aides, or state-tested nurses aides to be specific. We have social workers and chaplains for emotional and spiritual support, social needs. We also have therapists as needed to maintain quality of life, like massage therapy, music therapy, depending on what the patient needs, right? And trained volunteers as well. The work of our team, we develop the plan of care. We manage pain, anxiety, and other symptoms. You're probably thinking, why did she bold anxiety? I'll tell you why. Because that is something that people don't think about, right? Not only do we help manage the patient's anxiety or the resident's anxiety, but we help to bring the family's anxiety under control. Quick story. I met with a patient many years ago, a gentleman in his home. He suffered from flash edema. It's heart failure. And all of a sudden, the flash edema part of it would come into his lungs like fluid, and he couldn't breathe. And he would call 911. And he was hesitant to sign the hospice paperwork. And that's what I was there to do. And so I said, I know it's hard to face. He said, no, you don't get it. He said, I'm not afraid to die. I'll never forget what he said. I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid to suffer. I feel like I'm suffocating. And so he was calling 911 like every week or two. They were rushing him to the hospital, which took 15, 20 minutes to get there because he was kind of out in the country. And then they were giving him medications to make him comfortable. But what I said to him and his wife, I said, look, we are going to get the same medications on board that they're giving you at the hospital. Only now you don't have to wait and go to the hospital. They will be at your house. We can talk you through giving those medications, and we'll send a nurse on the way. So he signed up for hospice, and this patient's anxiety, and frankly, the family's anxiety, went from way up here to cool as a cucumber, because now he and his wife had meds in her purse on board, right? On board, will travel. They went around, and instead of being like stuck at home near the hospital, whatever, they went around and they visited all their grandkids. They went to the pool. They went to the restaurants. They went to Walmart, wherever they wanted to go, because they weren't afraid anymore. The only thing, the family was they were so pleased that we were able to help, but they had one complaint. It's like, okay, what's your complaint? The complaint is that they didn't call us sooner. The patient, sadly, like he lived 3 weeks. Could you imagine, like if he would have signed up for hospice 6 months before or something like that, he could have had that quality of life for that much longer. Okay, I promised Lindsay I wouldn't do stories because I'm going on forever, but I can't help myself. Okay, we attend to the emotional, psychosocial, and spiritual aspects of dying and caregiving. Christina, you're allowed to laugh at me now, it's okay. She laughs at me all the time. We laugh at each other. Anyway, we teach caregivers how to provide care, advocate for the patient and family, and we provide bereavement care, which is a fancy word for grief care and counseling. Okay, who pays for it? We're almost done, I promise. Just a couple more slides. Medicare and Medicaid cover hospice at 100%, zero copay. Yay, one of the best things Medicare ever did is cover hospice at 100%. There is some coverage by insurance and HMOs if people don't have Medicare or Medicaid. Private pay, and we're not going to send you a bill. Talk to us. Let's work something out if somebody doesn't have Medicare, Medicaid. Okay. Admission criteria, real quick. Pardon me. The general requirements to qualify for hospice. Patient has to have a life-limiting illness, prognosis of less than or equal to 6 months. Okay, I just noticed I forgot to put the word months on there. I firmly believe that only God knows the number of our days, and he ain't telling. The rest of us are just guessing. It's an educated guess. The physicians don't even know. They're just guessing. So I say this, when in doubt, call us. Let our nurse, let our admissions nurse and our physician and the primary care physician really work together and determine what the guesstimated life expectancy of the person is. They have to consent to accept services, whoever the decision maker is for the family or patient, or the patient themselves, if they're in their right mind. They have to be moving in the direction of pursuing comfort care versus life prolonging care. What we look at is when the burden of the treatment is starting to outweigh the benefit of the treatment, like chemotherapy or physical therapy or something like that. When the burden starts to outweigh the benefit, then is when it's time to call hospice in. And people can do just an information only meeting with us because it can be so scary. So there's no obligation. Meet with us, we'll answer your questions, and then you can decide from there. The good news is there is zero penalty if people change their mind. And that's really good news. And you know what? We honor that. That is not unusual. Every now and again that we'll have the family say, look, we're gonna sign off on hospice and go try some more chemotherapy. Or we think mom is getting stronger and needs to try that physical therapy. We say, go and do whatever you can do to maximize the quality of life of the person that you love and care for. And then you can come back when you're ready. So that's how hospice works. I just want to open it up now for questions and answers.
Holly, I just want to say thank you. You shared our story. You added years to my mom's life, and you added quality to all of our lives. Hospice is amazing. So thank you for sharing. You did a beautiful job today.
Thank you, Rachel. And God bless you for saying that. I really appreciate that.
Holly, I'm a huge advocate for I'm a huge advocate for hospice, and you really nailed the nail on the head. I didn't say that right.
Hit the nail on the head. There we go.
Yes, hit the nail on the head. With people waiting too long. So how can we all, just within the community and everything, be better advocates, just to let people know, like, to call you guys sooner? Like, what do you suggest?
What I always tell people is, when in doubt, just call me. My cell, 513-609-3905. You don't have to say a patient name. Just call me and just say, hey, this is kind of a situation that I'm seeing, and what do you think? And then I can point you in that right direction. And I'm not clinical, so if I don't know, I can bring in one of my nurses or team managers to help answer questions. But I would say, you know, there are no like hard and fast answers, because every patient's going to present so differently. It's really interesting because recently, because you bring to mind another story, recently I got a call from one of my buildings who said that they had a patient that was kind of going back and forth to Jerry Psych. And I was like, I wonder if that's terminal agitation, you know? And we were able to actually admit the patient, get continuous care in there, and this patient only lived for like 3 days. And so it was terminal agitation. You know what I mean? So it's like, when in doubt, so corny, but when in doubt, give me a shout. But it's
No,
true.
that's great. Yeah. If you guys are not able, like not in a facility, but out in the community at home somewhere, if you are unable to qualify somebody for hospice, but you recognize that they need a little bit more than what they're getting, do you guys at that time then refer to a skilled services, or say maybe you need to look at going to somewhere, or just anything else, whatever it might be, just even in home, so that they can get extra services? Or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. We definitely do that. We can, and we do refer to skilled services, and maybe sometimes even private duty at home, or, you know, if they need assisted living, something like that. We really want, if they're already in assisted living, we really want to help them age in place. So if they don't qualify for hospice yet, a lot of times, of course, we'll recommend like private duty care to kind of supplement if possible. And just watch them really closely and reevaluate them. And I think if they, especially if they need hospice to age in place in assisted living, what we like to do is even reevaluate them. Sometimes people are just having a good day and they don't look like they qualify. So maybe if they're having, you know, a more normal day, we can come out and reevaluate them again.
Great, thank you.
I know we're bumping up on 10 o'clock, and I apologize. I did go long. I knew I would, but.
You're good. No, you're
Okay,
good.
The stories are
Jill has a
important too.
question.
Yeah. Anybody
Jill
else?
has a question. Go ahead, Jill.
Let me unmute myself. Good morning, Miss Holly.
Hi, Jilly. That's my colleague, Jill.
Yeah, we are buddies. We're buddies.
Yes.
I signed on this morning to support Miss Holly.
I appreciate it.
Oh, I love you, buddy. You know that. I just wanted to add to, when you do talk to families, and Holly taught me this actually, encouraging them to meet with us to learn about our program does not mean that they have to sign on our program. It can be merely informational so they can make a plan for down the road. It just may not be the time right now for them to make the decision, but it can be another tool in their toolkit to help them make decisions in the future. And I just wanted to include that when you have families that are like, well, the word hospice, well, all we want to do is encourage that person to speak to someone that knows about how the program works and gives them their options. And then they have that to rely on or back up on in the future. That was all I wanted to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jill. Hey, Christina, did you want to jump in and add anything real quick, or?
Just, I think you did really great. Only thing is, you know, being on hospice doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay on hospice. Like you said, we have had instances before where you have an Alzheimer's patient, they fall, break their arm. You know, we do want them to get treatment for that type of thing, you know, so they can have a hospital trip, x-rays, even a surgery for a broken arm or something like that if needed, and then they can come back onto our services, you know, because that broken arm has nothing to do with their dementia, and we don't we just look at what's appropriate for each situation. It's not once you're on, you're signed in till the end type deal. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yep. Totally agree. Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that. And I have to say, I like your background. It's very like nature.
It's because I'm in my car.
I love it. No, but it's so true. And I think in my presentation, like I focus a lot on we'll keep you out of the hospital, but there are some cases, like Christina said, where people do need to go to the hospital. And we definitely honor that.
You're muted, Lindsay.
There you go. Lindsay. Hey, Lindsay, you're muted.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. No, I just want to say thank you again. Holly did a wonderful job. And, you know, like we said, we're huge advocates of hospice. So any way we can help spread the word just about the service and how people can really benefit from it. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for jumping on, and you all have an awesome Wednesday.
Okay, thank you so much, Lindsay. Thanks everybody for coming.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.